that brings us to the last chapter here, and that is the rules changes in the rules glossary. This is just a really small snippet of what is to come in terms of like the modified changes. Spells, we have the arcane spells, which now are for bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards who harness magic, as do artificers.
So there you go. Warlocks are arcane.
They are an arcane. Yep. Artisan tools. Artisan tools are in the category of tool which a character can gain with tool proficiencies. So so these ones that cost 15 gold pieces a piece. I imagine that these are just literally everything, mason tools, yada yada yada, whatever.
Yeah. Your artisan's tools, brewer's kit, and your leatherworkers, and all of that.
Yep. Then we got the creature types. So the creature, I hope that this is it, because if there are more, it'll be kind of weird. Aberrations, beasts, celestials, constructs, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, giants, humanoid, monstrosity, oozes, plant, and undead.
Monstrosity.
Monstrosity.
Yeah, these are the same creature types as before.
Yeah.
Metrosity.
Welcome to Metrosity.
Yeah, there's no new one there.
There's no new ones and no lost ones from before. Yeah. They're all the same creature types as before.
Yo.
And I've always hated monstrosity as a tag. It's a miscellaneous category, and
it's a
they've never
tag,
had
right?
good. Yeah,
I kind of feel the way about I feel the way about giant and humanoid, to be honest. Like,
I recently had a reworking of like my my reincarnation table, and I was like, what counts as like a playable race these days, and do I put everything on a possible reincarnate table? And so I had to like categorize things, and then I got to a point where I was like, I just had to arbitrarily ignore giants, because everything that I was coming up with that made sense for being like this race and this race, they're options to turn into. I just kept coming back to giants and being like, I don't want the option that somebody reincarnates as a giant, because it'll break the game. But at the same time, the distinction between them is kind of arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Next up is the D20 test. Now, this is one of the kind of like, I say it's like one of the big topics. It's not a big change.
Yeah.
It's just like something that's happened, which of course is our standard understanding of how D20 works. You roll a D20, you get a result, blah, 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 blah. Now, when you roll a D20 test, the target must have a number no less than 5 and no greater than 30 for the test to succeed.
So that's the first big change, is that they've called it D20 Test, and that the D20 Test is now accounting for the 3 things that they would always list out. Whenever a creature makes an ability check, saving throw, or attack roll, blah blah blah. Yep. And instead of having to say those 3 things always back and back to back, they're now just referring to all 3 of those things as a D20 test.
Yes.
Attack roll, ability check, saving throw.
Oh, I never considered that, but yes, true. Yeah. It's a new term.
So they're calling them D20 Test. And they're also specifying a DC for any test cannot be less than 5 or greater than 30. So you can never have an armor class less than 5. You can never have an armor class greater than 30. You can't have a saving throw that's a DC less than 5 or more than 30. You can't have an ability check that's less than 5 or more than 30.
I interpret it different.
How so?
I say that you just can't do a test. If the test is less than 5, you automatically succeed. And if the test is higher than 30, you automatically fail.
Yeah. If to be warranted, in order for the DM to call for a saving throw or an ability check or an attack roll, it has to be a DC between 5 and 30.
Yeah. But let's say, for example, Dredd is playing a character who is shooting Rob's character, who happens to be the avatar of a god. And I've said that, the avatar of the god is nigh unkillable. And Dredd says, I'm making an attack. And I say, well, you can't. You will fail. Because your AC, quote unquote, would be above 30. Yeah. So would you say that this says that the GM can't?
This says the GM cannot make that check. He cannot ask for an ability check with a DC more than 30. If you ask for a check, it has to be 30 or less.
Yeah. But the GM could potentially just say you cannot succeed in this.
Yeah, the DMs can say you're not able to make a check, which I think is worse. I think that's worse GMing. I think it's good for me to say there's no chance of you winning, but if the character's like, I want to make a check, I want them to make that check, because they're going to fail, we've established, but it's setting up, and we're going to get into this with the rolling 20s and rolling 1s and crits as well, but they're setting up a binary distinction of success and failure for all of these D20 tests, attack roll, saving throws, and ability checks. And it's not binary. I don't ever use those things as binary. attack rolls usually are binary in my world. It's either if you get a 17 and his armor class is 18, you miss, and if you get an 18, you hit. So it's binary, yes or no. But for checks, ability checks, and even sometimes to a certain extent saving throws, if I have in mind that the DC is somewhere around a 15 and you get like a 13, I'm going to still give you something. I'm just not going to give you everything you would have got on a 15.
Degrees
and
of success,
if the DC was a 15 and you
failure.
got a 20, I'm going to give you even more than I thought you were going to get at a 15. I'm going to give you those degrees of success and failure, which you're not going to get if I set the DC of a monster at 35, or the AC of a monster, let's say, at 35, and you make an attack. I call for you to make an attack because I know full well that you're not going to hit. But if you roll a 27, that's going to help me flavor how I'm going to describe that miss more than if you'd rolled a 3.
Yeah.
A side note:
do you hit his armor, or did you miss him entirely?
Do the same with like mental and like knowledge checks as well. Like you're like, oh, they got a 5. I still want them to know something, but I'll give them
the information that anybody of this world would know.
Yeah, I'm not going to get the binder out and be like, on the 5th day of the 5th moon of the 6th. It's like, no, you have a general idea.
And
of what
they've put it in there, I imagine, to do with like slowing things down, not asking for checks that aren't needed. But checks, even asking for checks that aren't needed, are an important tool for a DM to stall. If nothing else, it gives me 10 seconds to think about what the fuck I'm going to do. Because I get to go, okay, make an athletics check for me. But if you're proficient in sleight of hand, you can add your sleight of hand as well. And meanwhile, I'm going, so what if they succeed on this? What will it look like? And then they go, oh, I got a 17 plus, I got a 4. And then you said I can add my, so I got 23. And then in that time that it's taken them to do it, I've gone, oh yeah, I know what's going next. It just gives me a few seconds of stall time.
Yeah, I think that comes down to GM instinct more than anything else as well. And
it also it hampers play, right? Like you don't want people not to push buttons and to try things. And so when you say, hey, like you're like, oh, can I do this thing? No, you can't. And I do think there's a time and a place for it, but I think that it needs to be like very like specific.
I know a lot of people who would argue as well, like, why would you ever call for a DC that's less than 5 anyway? Because you're going to succeed. You're not going to succeed. The dice goes down to 1. The dice goes down to 1. DC's like, people treat a 10 as like the easiest thing to do. Like a DC of 10 is like the minimum that they ever suggest in like any of the players' handbooks and stuff. Like DC of 10 should be easy. DC of 10 is not easy, especially if you've got a negative modifier. The other day in Twitch Tales, I had Mel roll a thing that I had set as a DC of 3. I thought it was relatively easy to succeed, but I knew that there was a chance of failure. And she rolled a 2, and she has a -2 modifier, so she got a 0. So she failed a DC 3 check. And that's why on my DM screen, right there in the corner, it says like a table of all the different DCs of how to set them, and it starts from 3 and it goes up in 3s. It says exceptionally easy 3. If something's exceptionally easy but has a chance of failure, I'm gonna ask for a check.
Sometimes checks aren't even based on the skill of the individual. Sometimes there's something that's hampering them, or there's an environmental thing, and like, oh, you failed, but you're skilled, but you failed because the blinding light is currently distracting you, and you're something else is happening.
And that comes down to good GMing as well. Like
exactly.
To flavor it as not their failure.
Do you count skill checks as ability checks?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's because I was gonna say, like, there are definitely some moments where I'm just like, no, your character is just gonna succeed at this because it's something your character is just sensibly.
If it's something that's in the background, or it's something that they've already got a modifier that's greater than the DC, I'm just gonna say
sure. And I think that's
and also you have your passive consierations as well. If you're like, oh, I want him to move the story forward, you're like, you're passively better
than that.
Exactly right.
There's a whole bunch of things, but this was in a combat situation, so it was turn-based. It was about whether or not they could get Mel to either come to them or go away from them. Their companion B was like, they're trying to use semaphore signs, like the up and down, like to when you're signaling over a distance. They taught their giant bee companion these symbols, but they haven't been drilling her on it for a long time, and in the middle of a combat they were trying to get her from a distance to like understand what they were trying to say. So I was like, you have spent downtime teaching her this, but she has got a -2 intelligence, and you haven't drilled it lately. So it's a very easy thing, but it's a chance that she'll fail. So I rolled for it and she failed. And so she was like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me. And they wasted their turn essentially. And that's why I asked for the check. If there was not like a consequence of failure, I wouldn't have asked for such a small check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, why don't you take us into rolling a 1 and a 20?
if you roll a 1 on the D20, aka a nat 1, I don't know why they don't just adopt those terms. Everybody calls them nat 20s and nat 1s, or crit 20s and crit 1s. No, and they never use those terms in any of the rules. They just say if you roll they always use this wording. If you roll a 1 on the D20, if you roll a 20 on the D20, they never actually call it a nat 20. It's just common parlance that calls it that. If you roll a 1 on the D20, the D20 test automatically fails regardless of any modifiers to the roll. So that is now included for saving throws and ability checks, not just attack rolls.
I don't like that
I don't like it at all.
Yeah. Okay, good.
It's not something it's not like something that I'm so bothered about that I would die on this hill. Like it's
I would die on
most of the time.
I would die on a hill for
most of the time, and that one is going to fail the ability.
Do you guys not like it from a player perspective or a GM's perspective, though?
Both.
Yeah.
I think that as a level 20 character with a plus 18 modifier in persuasion, I shouldn't fail at persuading somebody 5% of the time. Correct. That's a lot. 5% of the time is a lot of time.
Huge. It's huge.
I shouldn't be if I've got expertise in something crazy like stealth or sleight of hand or something. I shouldn't be failing 5% of the time.
I wonder if it comes back to the thing that I said before, where it's not a skill fail. It could be like a narrative fail with the whole, like, someone bursts into the room and
something else
grabs.
Comes into form.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's not a personal failing. It's more of a narrative fail where it's like, something interesting is going to happen here 5% of the time. And I think that, like, it being a D20 test sort of sets it up to not be that, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, it's a D20 test. We are testing whether the character.
Like you're testing. You're testing your abilities.
Yeah.
Well, and it's your character sheet that's saying whether you succeed or not.
A natural 20 for me is a critical success that brings about that kind of joy and that sense of uplifting. Like when you roll a nat 20. When you roll a natural 1, it's very hard to not feel like you are punishing or being punished for having rolled your result. Even if your result is spectacular, right? Because you've built your character and they're really excellent at this skill, it very rarely turns into a situation where your character hasn't just had an aneurysm for some reason. And, you know, like, you might have come up with this most eloquent way of approaching the king. You're like, yes, my lord, I'm really sorry that we've been delayed in our travels, but blah, 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 blah. You roll a 1 in your negotiation, and you've actually said, I'm sorry, Mr. Fartface, but I've come here because I wanted to. It's like, you know, it's always that. Like, actually, Intimidation's a great example. You roll in that 1 on Intimidate, for some reason, you've made a punk of yourself, and the other person's not just not intimidated by you, but now they're laughing at you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're laughing at you,
Yeah, I do wonder if it's one of those situations where it kind of brings back the sense of failure. Like, I don't know if that's something that needs to be brought back or not, but, like, there's a lot of, like people that want to succeed, right? But, like, 5% of the time, something interesting will happen. And I don't know whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that it's very like a harsh way to rule it, right?
Like, I think if they lent into that description and said it fails, even if you've got a high modifier, it's sometimes circumstances are beyond your player, your character's control, and somebody looks the wrong way at the wrong time, or something, a bird squawks to ruin your stealth. Like, if they included some examples of how to tell a DM,
that would be better,
because that's like relatively advanced DM tips. Like, that's like something that not a lot of DMs pick up on immediately. You have to be playing for a while before you realize it's better to narrate your players' failures as circumstances beyond their control, even though they were the one who rolled the dice and they were the one who rolled poorly and they were the one who had a bad modifier or whatever. It's not their fault that they failed necessarily.
So, like,
that's why I often ask my players, like, I don't just do it on
how do you fail
on you know, the final blow of the I sometimes just give them any old thing, like, tell me what an 11 looks like on a persuasion check, tell me what a 3 looks like on a persuasion check, what goes wrong that makes this not work.
It's an advanced technique. It's not for new
so
GMs.
If they included that a little bit more in the PDF to, like, say, don't forget to don't forget that failure is not on them.
Like, the book says you fail, so you fail. It's not like it's not like, oh, interestingly, this happens, what are you going to do next? It's like, no, you fail. It's game over 5% of the time. That's why I'm on the fence about it, because I feel like that we've the 5e how it currently stands, it's all like positivity. It's all like succeed. I like the idea that we are welcoming back possible narrative failure into stories, which is like, how does this How does this build it interestingly?
This ties in really well with an analogy I just heard from Brennan Lee Mulligan. He was doing a roundtable with the Critical Role people, and he said that as a character, you always want to succeed. If you've been given the ring to throw in the fires of Mordor, you want to grab the eagles and go straight there and drop it in the fire. Like you want the most efficient way to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, this was a good analogy.
As a player, you don't want that because it's not interesting to have that as your character arc. So he uses the analogy of water running downhill. The water is always going to flow in the direction of least resistance. That's how water works. And your character is always going to flow in path of least resistance. So it's your job as storytellers, not only the DM but the players as well to a certain extent, to channel out the hillside so that at any one moment your character is doing the path of least resistance. But then when you get to the end and look back, you have had an interesting windy story. You've had character acts and things. But from moment to moment, you should have your and I'm thinking of it now because it's that same thing of like the players, the characters don't want to be failing, but the players, you should have failure. So you need to add in failure to the system. You need to bake in failure to the system so that drama can happen.
And that's why I'm on the fence about it with the whole idea. If it's handled properly, I think it's great because like we've had talks about this on my other tables. Like when do we bring botches back into anything? And botches have been pretty much not there because it's a negative experience for the player, right?
People don't tend to like
people
fumbles,
right? But it's interesting. It's fun. You wanna see what happens next when this new point has been put in there, and that's I'm hoping that's kind of like where it leads, but I just hope it's not used as license to like cause negative like play at the table, which like no, I roll, you just fail.
Like, I'm gonna throw this out there. Whatever your value is, if it's your attack, your save, or your skill, if the DC is more than 5 lower than what your minimum value be, should you roll a 1, I'm not even going to ask for a test. I'm just like, no. If you get 5 or lower, I might look at botching, right? Like if you get 5 lower than what the DC is.
I'm saying this is Pathfinder.
Otherwise I just well, that's not actually a Pathfinder roll. That's
isn't it like if you get 5 or 10 over the DC, 10
like 10 10 lower is a fumble, 10 higher is a crit in addition to the nat 1s and nat 20. That's a different thing. But
success and fail ranges, which is cool.
I'd say that would be it. If you've got like an 18 in your stealth and the guards are just some plebeian guards and the DC is 10, no, don't even roll. Your character sneaks like a freaking master thief, like he is, with no problems at all.
So I suppose you could do that here because if you don't ask for the roll, then they can't roll an at 1, and so they can't have the automatic failure.
Exactly. That would be
unless you want to set up the automatic failure.
But then you've kind of stuck your. I mean, you've not wasted the points of putting your points into stealth because it's the fact that you have those points in stealth that allowed you to get away without rolling. But at the same time, I've got a character sheet that allows me to add 18 anytime I roll a dice, and I don't get to roll the dice anymore because I'm so good at it.
Well, I think
it's kind of like automation of like video games and stuff, like any sort of video games that are essentially like you're playing. The intent of playing is to play less. Like you're trying to automate things so that you play less. And
I think it's up to the GM to invite that, right?
Yeah, but
so the GM would be like, I want to see if there's a 5% chance here that this is going to go bad.
Yeah, but keeping in mind, I'm also talking about like major discrepancies here. I'm talking about like 5 lower than what you would get with a natural 1. You know what I mean? Like in terms of DCs, and the numbers in D&D don't really get that astronomically high. It would usually be if someone quite reasonable or high level is doing something against an opposing target who's actually not really going to be able to keep up with that level of it. And I think there's a certain level of like good feels about like, it's like, I'm so good that I don't need to make checks with this anymore. I mean, yes, if I have to make checks, then it's a test against this thing. But there is also something to be said about like, cool, I don't need to sneak into, past this bandit like toll bridge and deal with like these bunch of level CR half plebeians because I'm a level 12 rogue. There's a certain point where you don't want to be making these checks because do you want a 5% chance for your level 18 to get caught by these guys? It's like
which comes down to deciding where you want to apply the chance of failure, right? So
Yeah.
and you want to get to the path of release resistance to the point where you want to set up the challenges. Yeah. So
and it does come down to the DM to decide, like,
100%.
yes, there's no chance of you failing in this, so I won't ask for the roll.
Mm.
But it'll take some adjusting if they go with this as the rule, because a lot of GMs will ask for the roll as sort of like a default or like a just an instinct.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
somebody says the words, so the keywords trying to hide or trying to be slow, and the DM will, as a Pavlovian response, say, "Give me a stealth check."
Yeah.
And people,
but again,
people want to roll
you
dice.
ask for that, you're like, "Oh, I've just introduced the chance of."
But as you were saying, there's also that, like, it buys you time to be able to consider as a GM. It builds you that time to be able to consider what you're going to do with your next action, which you can then go, oh, they can't fail this. They don't need to know that, or they can't succeed this. They don't need to know, and then you can just plan your next thing and use that stall tactic.
And when you write your adventures, you could actually put in, if there's a critical failure here, this is what happens. Like you could have that structure there ready to go. It's like if they have a critical failure, someone's going to round the corner, or you're going to have like the trap spring or something like that. So you could account for.
We need to move on. So this was just rolling a 1. Obviously, rolling a 20 is the same, but with a D20, if you roll a 20, it's an automatic success regardless of modifiers. In addition to that, you also gain inspiration when you roll a 20, which I hate. I hate it not only because of all the reasons I've given about like not liking using inspiration for the players when it's a DM tool, but also because I don't like the idea that it snowballs. They've specifically said it should be good that it snowballs. You succeeded so hard that you're going to be even more chance of succeeding on the next one. Snowballing is bad game design. Like I know I've played enough board games and card games and dice games and tabletop games to know a little about game design. I'm not an expert by any means, but I do listen to a few game design podcasts and things like that. I know that, and I just know from personal experience as well, snowballing is bad game design, because if you are relying on a game like D&D that is heavily combat based, if you're having a session that is a lot of combat, for instance, and you just are having an off night, and we've all been there, we've all had a night when we just can't roll above a 10. It sucks, and that is a snowballing effect. If you are not getting inspiration for your nat 1s, then you don't have any reason to be getting better at a thing. If you're already rolling well, you don't need the inspiration to also give you advantage. If you're going to use this inspiration, you should get inspiration for rolling 1s, not 20s. I agree. So that if you roll a 1, fuck, that sucks, but at least I've now got an advantage token, so that I'm less likely to continue rolling sucky tonight.
I like that a lot more.
I love that.
Like,
I think that's
we learn systems that I've been playing.
And unlike just gamified, that a lot of these rules are feeling just game mechanics without tie into real world. In the real world, we learn more from our from our failures than our successes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I've always said that that your experience points, not that anybody actually uses experience in D&D, but if you're using experience points and not milestone, you should really get experience points for failures. There are systems, Monster of the Week, I think, Powered by the Apocalypse, Dungeon, there's some 2d6 systems where you only level up when you've got a certain amount of experience, but you only get experience every time you fail a check.
Yeah.
Every time you fail a check, you mark off 1 experience because you're learning from your things, and it's snowballing in the good way.
I feel like that's really good game design. There's a lot of systems that have like benefits for failure, right? Like whether it be meta currency or whether it be like, like you said, experience or learning. And I think that's great. I have a notorious roller at my table that rolls very poorly, like Will Wheaton poorly, and that's M. She can't roll well, and it's been a bane of hers for as long as she's played tabletop role playing games. And I think games like that are great for her.
It's literally why I gave Ben at the Viva La Dirty table. I came up with a system of Othello pieces where I put a little 5 tokens in front of him, and every time he attempts something that's important, he can't just do it on random checks. But if it's something that's actually important, an initiative check, an attack roll, whatever, and he rolls a 5 or less on the dice, I flip one over. And then once he's charged up all 5 of them, he can just get an automatic crit on the next thing. And I just came up with that rule for him because he was having a bad time playing the game because of his bad luck, and nothing else that I could do as a dungeon master. I'm like, I can't control the way that the dice fall. He's getting 1s left, right, and center. So I wanted to bake in some rule of like,
and that's great.
The more you fail, the better the chance of you actually
100%
succeeding.
I have a suggestion, and go with me on this. What if instead, because firstly, I hate the idea that players are entitled to inspiration. I don't think at any point in time a player should roll something and be like, I'm entitled to an inspiration, please, GM.
That's what I don't like about it.
Give me thing. I don't think that should be the case. I think inspiration should be inspiration, and I think what they should introduce is the idea of like basically fate points, similar to the way that you were using the Othello thing, where the GM implements fate points to aid in these sorts of things. So instead of inspiration being like, oh yes, we get a boost for getting a natural 20, it's no, you get a fate point. This fate point can be used to twist fate into your advantage because you are having a shit time. You've rolled a natural 1, gain a fate point. And the fate point can be either a static boost of like the 1d6 kind of bardic inspiration thing, or maybe it's an advantage on your next roll. It should be used to, as you said, end snowballing in a negative way rather than continue snowballing in a positive way.
Game design that is anti-snowball is always a good idea. Like things as simple as like if you miss an attack roll, you have a little +1 to your next attack roll until you hit. And if you miss again, that's now +2. Eventually, you are going to hit because if you've missed 5 times in a row, you're going to have a +5 to your next attack roll.
And you start learning how
it's crunchy, but it's only crunchy if you don't use physical tokens to represent it. If you can literally throw a token at your player every time they miss, and then they've just got a pool of beads in front of them, and they can go, I'm going to cash in all of these to attempt to hit. I still miss. I'm going to take them all back and add 1 to it.
And you know,
I like the idea of momentum in battle as well. You're like, oh, I'm learning how they're moving. I can see how they can move, so I get a +1, a +1, a +1, and then I will hit.
And look, if you're watching any of the devs from like the actual one D&D team, you know, you could always release like little gold coin tokens, D, and then the and then the D, and then you know what? You've sell those.
You're always looking for things to supplemental things
there you go.
The dice the cards and the dice and everything else. You just tokens, inspiration tokens, fate
One
points.
D&D tokens.
Yeah, whatever you go. That's it.
All right. Okay. Moving on. Critical hits, still in the same vein. Weapons and unarmed strikes have special features for player characters only. Critical hits. If a player character rolls a 20 for an attack roll with a weapon or an unarmed strike, the attack is also a critical hit, which means it deals extra damage to the target. It works the same way as it always did. It doubles the damage dice, but only the damage dice, and only that of the weapon. So now the big change here is that it's only player characters that can crit. None of your NPCs or your monsters can crit. Absolute bullshit. Probably my critical hits from my cold dead hands. Fuck you. And weapon and unarmed strikes only. So no sneak attack crit, no smite damage crit, no firebolt crit, no spell attack in any method crit. You can't crit on anything other than a weapon or an unarmed strike, and only the unarmed strikes that deal a dice in damage. So like if you're not a monk or a tavern brawler, you're just dealing 1 point of damage. You're not rolling a D1, and so you don't crit on a regular unarmed strike either.
Now, this is under the understanding that we don't know exactly what monsters and spells are going to look like as they come out.
They have said that, it's okay because monsters already get their version of a crit in that they get recharge abilities. And I'm like, so are you saying that all monsters are going to have recharge? A level 1 goblin mook is going to have a rechargeable ability that it can work? I'm
wondering if that's where they're going.
Recharge, temper tantrum.
I don't know if
it makes no sense. And also, recharge is nothing like a crit. It doesn't work the same mechanics. It doesn't have the same feeling in the battle. It has nothing to do with it. I don't know what they're trying to say. Like recharge is somehow to do with crits.
But if they have a different suite of powers, instead of being crits, you have this sort of power instead of crit power.
Maybe. But the reasoning they gave for is because sometimes he says there's twofold reasons in the video. He says, number one is it can be super dangerous at first level because if you get crit by a bugbear, you can get straight one-shot killed without death saving throws, which is true. But that's a product of the screwed up HP system of this game, where at 0th level, as a commoner, you have 4 hit points. Yeah. And at first level, you have somewhere between 6 and 10. And then from 2nd level onwards, you can tank a heavy crossbow bolt to the face and walk away from it. That's how HP works in this game. And it makes no sense. And instead of just fixing HP, like another house rule that is used often to fix that particular problem, is that at 1st level, you have your 2nd level HP. Yeah. And then at 2nd level, you gain no new HP. And then at 3rd level onwards, you gain HP. So it gives you that 1st level buffer of being look, we're not going to outright kill you. So there's a bunch of different things they could have fixed rather than taking away crits from their monsters. And then the second thing he says, so sometimes crits are very dangerous. And secondly, sometimes they're underwhelming. So sometimes because of the way that it works out, the math works out that they're less damaged than they would have been otherwise. So you just get rid of them altogether because sometimes you can roll poorly. Again, that's a product of the way that you calculate crits. So I think everybody I know uses crit house rules in some way to make critical hits feel more critical. so that you don't accidentally roll snake eyes on your 2d12s.
Yeah.
Just
You're
so
like,
we're not,
cool,
just so
two
we're not
damage.
lingering too much, because I feel like we all three of us feel the same way about this. I think what they need to introduce are brutal crits,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they also need to do glancing blows.
Yes.
I think those two things. So for those of you who don't know, brutal crits are where your first lot of damage is considered to be maxed out. You then roll one lot of damage as per normal, and you add the two together, and that is your critical hit.
Yeah.
A glancing blow is when you meet the target DC, and the effect will continue to go through, or the attack will continue to go through, but you deal half damage because it's only a glancing blow. These two elements, I think, really help offset each other for how much damage you could potentially get from that.
If you only just meet the armor class, then you're only dealing half damage.
Exactly, and I think that works really, really well. Look, crits are dangerous. They should be. If you have been critically wounded, you've been critically wounded.
That's why it's called a crit.
Why it's called a
critical.
Yeah.
You're in a critical state now because he's hit one of your critical vital organs.
Yeah. Unless monsters get a significant thing that they get when they get a natural 20.
Yeah.
I'm not
Now,
for this.
Now with brutal criticals, it's still got with brutal criticals, you're always guaranteed to do more than you could have rolled on a regular roll. That's why I introduced them, so that if you are doing a D4 damage, the minimum you can do is a D4 plus 1 from the second D4.
That's why I have them.
But the other end of that is that if you are applying brutal criticals to every dice that is rolled, you get it on paladin smites and on sneak attacks and things, which can be very fun, but you can quite quickly get up into the hundreds.
Okay, so I don't think they should be. So I don't disagree with their ability. They're saying that you shouldn't add it to all the extra stuff, right?
Yeah.
I do think spells maybe should still get the ability to crit, but not things like smite and sneak and all those other elements as well.
I think it should be, again, proficiency bonus related, since everything else in this edition is. Like, they should just say, when you crit, you get to add, you get to choose a number of the weapon dice equal to your proficiency bonus and max out those dice.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a really good one. So
that if you are doing sneak attack and you have 12 dice to roll, but you're only a 5th level whatever, you get 3 of your
3 rerolls out of the 12 dice.
You can max out those 3 dice.
So you take away the max damage, but you get a proficiency.
Yeah, you take away you get to reroll up to 3 of them or something.
Do you think they're gonna change, have monsters with like natural 20 abilities and they recharge on a crit?
I hope they do.
I think that's what's coming. Yeah, I think their rechargeable features are going to recharge on a crit, which isn't that useful because they're going to be recharging about 33% of the time anyway with a 5 or 6 recharge, and then they're going to recharge another 5% of the time when they crit, and only if they're attacking.
Recharge 20.
It might be, but there's also like at that point you're with recharge as it is. At the start of your turn, no action required. You just roll to see if they've got it back again.
Yeah.
If it recharges on a nat 20, then it's going to incentivize the monsters to use abilities that require them to roll a 20. So anything that requires a saving throw from the target, or anything that requires just like area of effect or anything like that, anything that doesn't have the monster rolling a d20 is not going to have a chance of recharging their abilities.
Yeah.
True.
It's going to incentivize like multi-attacking monsters more than spellcasting monsters and things.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's speed roll this. Divine spells. Yep. They're
the
divine
version of the arcane spells.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gaming sets,
spells.
kind of like your artisan sets. These are for gaming. Grapple.
They all cost
While
1 gold
grappled,
piece.
you gain the following effects. Your speed is 0 and cannot be changed. Attacks affected. You are at disadvantage on attack rolls against any target other than the grappler.
Love it.
You are movable. The grappler can drag or carry you, but the grappler suffers the slowed condition while moving you unless you are tiny or 2 or more size categories smaller than the grappler.
Interestingly, that means that if 2 tiny creatures are grappling, one of the tiny creatures grappling the other one can move them fine.
Yeah, I think it's because they're light.
I don't know why they've.
I imagine they'd be quite
tiny.
light. Just be mass.
Because once the tinier you get, the stronger you are comparative to your body size. So, yeah, kind of makes sense.
Escape. While grappled, you can make a dexterity or strength saving throw against the grappler's escape DC at the end of each of your turns, ending the condition on yourself if you succeed. Condition also ends if the grappler is incapacitated or if something moves you outside of the grappler's range without using your
I don't
speed.
like it. They've gotten rid of you having to make an action to escape a grapple. It just happens passively at the end of your turn now. you can make a saving throw at the end of your turn to avoid a grapple, which makes no sense. You should be making the choice of like, God, this guy's grabbing me. Do I keep attacking at this thing, or do I take my energy over to here and get rid of this grapple?
The only way I find this acceptable is if when they decide to make the feats and they do make a grappler feat, if it negates that. Because I kind of get it. Like if you're restraining,
at most it'll be like they have disadvantage on their attacks.
Yeah, against everyone except the grappler. Remember, so basically, if the grappler had like,
I'm saying that's what the feat will be. I imagine if they do come out with a feat like a grappler feat, it'll be like creatures that you're grappling have disadvantage on saves made to escape your grapple.
Oh yeah. There'd be. I mean, I was hoping that it'd be like, it takes an action to escape. Or they can't make attacks against you, or something to restrain them, or whatever.
I do like the introduction of the disadvantage when you're being grappled, because that's something that comes up so many times. People expect there to be because it's called grappled and not grabbed. Yeah, people expect grapples to be more like restrained, and they're like, "Oh, so do I have disadvantage on things and stuff because I'm grappled?" And it's like, "No, he's just grabbing you by the shirt. That's not. There's no other.
You can't move."
Yeah, you just can't move. That's the only difference. Whereas now it's like, you can't move, and you have to actually attack him or have disadvantage.
Does this mean they removed restrained?
I don't think they will have, but I wouldn't be as surprised if
I think restrained will probably move them from grapple to incapacitated.
Yeah.
Speaking of incapacitated, while you're incapacitated, you experience the following: inactive, you cannot take actions or reactions. No concentration, your concentration is broken. Speechless, you cannot speak. Surprised, if you're incapacitated when you roll initiative, you have disadvantage on your initiative roll. So
that all makes sense.
Seems all pretty
surprised. It seems like that's as far as they're going to go with surprised. Like disadvantage on the initiative roll. It makes me think, along with the alert thing, it makes me think that they're going to get rid of the surprised condition, even though it wasn't really a condition before. They're going to get rid of the whole can't take actions on your first turn of combat thing.
Yeah. I don't mind that. I think
it's cleaner.
Inspiration,
a lot less confusing for people, especially because initiative's already a little bit confusing in certain situations of like, I drew out my blade and attacked the shopkeeper. Roll initiative. Okay, so do I get my attack or not? Technically, no, you don't. And so, then I roll poorly on initiative and I go last in the initiative modifier. But now everybody who goes before me doesn't know that there's an attack happening, so that because the thing that triggered the combat hasn't happened yet. And then if you add a surprise onto that, people are like, who gets to go?
What happens right now? No, absolutely. I think hopefully whatever ambush surprise thing happens, it'll be far less confusing than it currently is. Inspiration. When you have inspiration, you can spend it to give yourself advantage on a D20 test. You must decide to do so before rolling, except obviously when you don't, because there are some things that we came across which said you can do it after.
That was just the lucky feat.
Gaining inspiration is the main way a character gains inspiration is by rolling a 20 for a D20 test. The DM can also award inspiration to a character who's done something that is particularly heroic or amusing. I think we've all expressed.
Another reason I've just thought of, though, a reason why I don't like the inspiration for a nat 20 is that, again, it incentivizes characters that roll more 20s than others. So martial classes are going to get inspiration much more often than spellcasters.
And
maybe that's part of why they did it, because martials are like,
that's why they can only get criticals
every 5 foot. I'm
going to search for traps. Anything, you can be fishing for skill checks. Be like, can I make a stealth check for this? Just because there's a chance I get a 20 and therefore an inspiration for it.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of that.
Only one at a time. You can never have more than one instance of inspiration. If there's something that gives you inspiration and you already have it, you can give inspiration to another player in the group who lacks it. We brought up Dread's idea before about instead of necessarily bumping inspiration, like if you have inspiration and you are getting it as frequently as this system seems to apply, having it advance, so a D4 to a D6 to a D8 to a D10 to a D12, not a bad idea. Because again, we've spoken about this throughout the whole video, so I'm not going to take too much time on this, but lots of ideas there. Losing inspiration. If you still have inspiration when you start a long rest, you lose that inspiration.
Reset.
Which is a balancing mechanic. Which is good.
I think it's good. And then
there's going to be a lot of people who are rolling with advantage to set up a camp. Because they're going to get to be like, at the end of the day, we're going to take a long rest. Can I roll a perception check?
Really?
Our long rest?
I thought they'd be rolling to like to pack up the camp after they've rested.
Yeah.
So you've rested, and then you're just like, I'm going to make us breakfast. And
But when you start a long rest, you lose the inspiration.
yeah, no, but when you
check.
finish the long rest, you come out of the long
You
rest.
get inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying that if you're going into long rest and you've got inspiration, you're going to lose.
Yeah,
So
you
there's going to be a lot
it.
of people who are like, I want to use on something. Can I make a perception check?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And make a
I think a
survival
lot of
check to
people
see
will
how
do
well
that.
I can cook this rabbit.
Or throw this rock. I can see how far I
Just
throw
to
it
see,
today.
Just to see.
All right.
People doing a lot of like knowledge checks, like, see if I can remember. Can I remember anything about the clues that we've been given so far to see if the DM can give me
Actually, that's not a bad idea. Yeah,
any
it's
information.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think inspiration as it is very exploitable.
Yeah.
From the players. Long rest. A long rest is a period of extended downtime, at least 8 hours long, during which a creature sleeps for at least 6 hours and performs no more than 2 hours of light activity, such as reading, talking, eating, or standing watch.
Same as before.
Yep. Benefit of a rest. At the end of a long rest, creature regains all lost hit points, which I love. The creature also regains spent hit dice up to half of the creature's total number of them rounded down to a minimum of 1. Creature cannot benefit from more than one long rest in a 24-hour period.
This is all the same as it was.
A creature must have at least one hit point at the start of the rest to gain its benefit. Well, the only difference is that you don't need to use like the long rest. You restore all your hit points, because wasn't that?
That's the same as 5e, mate.
Was it?
Yeah.
Someone's been lying to me.
There was actually several skits
You played
about
too many
it.
systems.
Who lied to me? Was it you, Dread? I feel like it was you.
No, that wasn't me.
Someone lied to me.
No, it's the survivability of D&D is huge because of
you
this.
play too many systems.
I do.
You've
play
always,
too many systems. I feel like
right
D&D,
from the start of
someone's-
5e, right?
Okay,
2014. It's always been the case. You always get your hit points back.
Unless
long
it's something to do with like maximum drain. You know, you can have HP that doesn't.
I actually
back.
don't like it. And maybe it's because I haven't played some of the more crunchy systems, but
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that you get a full reset every day,
Yeah, it's
regardless
very
of
gamified.
what happened the previous day. You are
It's
just
very
back up to
gamified.
full.
I think it should be something to do with your constitution, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like
I think
how
that
fast you heal.
putting hit dice possibly on long rest might be okay. Like if you're like, oh, you can spend hit dice to bring them back, and you only get them back when you have an extended rest is when you get hit dice back.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're getting into homebrew territory,
I know,
right?
Yeah.
I've always said that like hit points should just be like, there should be like some health shit and then some stamina shit, and you get all your stamina shit back on a long rest, but you only get like one of your health points back.
Yeah. All right. Interrupting rest. If a long rest is interrupted by combat or by 1 hour of walking, casting spells, or similar activity, the rest confers no benefit and must be restarted. However, if the rest was at least 1 hour before interruption, the creature gains the benefit of a short rest, which I don't know if that implies that a short rest is an hour long, but I think it might just be instead of a short rest being 10 minutes, if you have been trying to.
Short rest to an hour, mate.
Yeah. Oh, there an hour?
Yeah.
Okay.
Short rest to an hour. Yep.
Yeah.
It's not
Welcome
short.
to 5e.
Yeah, look, if I took an
hour.
hour to do anything, I guarantee you my missus would not call it a short amount of time. Okay?
Yeah.
Which is why in my games I've always had short rests as being half an hour long rather than an hour.
All right. Musical instrument?
Yes, so the change here is that, I don't know if it's technically a change, but something that is clear here is that a long rest is interrupted by combat, regardless of how long that combat is.
Yeah.
It was always like, I think before, it was like if you are interrupted from your long rest for more than an hour worth of combat, fighting, blah, 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 walking, spellcasting, yada, yada. I think it was just an hour. And it's like, you're not fighting for an hour. Nobody's fighting for an hour. But now it's saying it's interrupted by any amount of combat.
Okay, yeah.
Which is it's okay. I would not have it interrupted by, I would just increase the amount of time needed for it. So rules is written, if you get 7.5 hours into an 8 hour long rest and you have one single round of fight with a goblin, you need another 8 hours to rest. Whereas if you are being woken after 7 hours, you're going to need like another hour of I'm just going to add it on to be like, you need another hour of sleep. You need the remaining time plus another hour.
That would
Oh
be
boy, it looks like you have to set up another 8 hours sleep. I guess that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Because I mean, how often?
And then the douchebag DMs are just like, yeah, man, here's a single goblin who stabbed you.
But I mean, think about it. One of the basic tropes of like D&D adventuring is you get attacked by wolves in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a basic trope, but it would literally like just be the suckiest event in the world.
Yeah.
With this,
so close to getting my spells back.
Yeah.
I haven't rested in 7 days.
Yeah. No, I do like the idea that every interruption extends it by like an hour, let's say. Like
Yeah.
that would be.
Yeah, I'd do something like that, to be honest.
Musical
All right,
instruments.
musical instruments.
Yep.
Category of
Same
tool.
thing.
Same thing. They now cost all 20 gold piece across the board, regardless of the instrument. Primal spells. That's the third. Arcane, divine, and now primal. Primal is the one that druids and rangers use.
Rangers.
Yep.
Slowed, a new condition called
Yeah.
slowed. You experience the following effects: limited movement. You must spend an extra foot of movement for every foot you move, which is specially worded so that if you are that's a stackable effect. So that if you are going through difficult terrain and swimming and also slowed, then you'll be stacking up those extra feet of movement you have to move. Your attacks are affected. You have attack rolls against you have advantage while you're slowed. Makes sense. You can't dodge out of the way. And dexterity saving throws are affected. You have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws.
Yep.
So that means that with the slowed condition from grappling someone and moving with them, while you are moving, you are slowed. So you can grab somebody and move with them. But if you are dragging them out of melee range, and an attack of opportunity is made on you, it's made with advantage.
But also
now,
keeping in mind, if you are grappling someone, that person then has advantage on attacks.
Advantage on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the slowed condition. I like it. I like new conditions.
I think Dag's very happy because there's been several cases where we've been playing 5e and where he's
Where
like,
he
get the
said
slowed
slowed.
condition. And
And
we're
I'm
like,
like,
sorry,
"What
Dag,
are you talking
there's no condition. So as soon as I heard they brought slowed in, I was like, Dag's gonna love that.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Tool proficiency. If you have a proficiency with a tool, you get to add your proficiency bonus to the check. And like with the Xanathar's rules, they've also now made it official that if you have proficiency in a skill that is associated with the tool as well, you have advantage on the check. So if you are proficient in thieves' tools and sleight of hand, then you have advantage on the lockpicking check.
Yeah, nice.
Tremorsense. A creature with Tremorsense can pinpoint the location of a creature and moving objects within a specified range, provided the creature with Tremorsense and anything it's detecting are in contact with the same surface. Makes sense. They cannot detect objects or creatures in the air, and it does not count as seeing them. It does not count as a form of sight, which is going to have interesting sort of loopholes around casting spells, because you're going to be like, oh, well, we're in pitch black, but I know where he is because I got Tremorsense. He's right. He's 7 feet in front of me at a 32-degree angle.
I just can't
so I'm going to cast my spell at him, and then the DMs who are like, actually, they'll go. Technically, that spell means says that you need require line of sight in order to cast the target. And it does not count as seeing them.
That's true, but it does count as being detected. So as long as, I mean, the way I'd rule it is if you can detect where they are with that kind of, specifically it says pinpoint accuracy, you'd be able to target them. As soon as you can't target
but that's not
them,
the rules as written.
If you can, then Unarmed Strike is a melee attack action involving your body, which is
using your body to damage. I like the way they've worded that. It uses your body to damage just any part of your body.
Just any part of your body.
Damage with any
shoulder, headbutt, fist kick.
Involves using your body to damage, grapple, or shove a target within your reach.
Yep. So damage is bludgeoning equal to 1 plus your strength modifier. So if you remember a Tavern Brawler, it makes it 1d4 instead of the 1.
I wonder if the wording reach here, it says
I thought
you can make an attack within your reach. If you're holding a reach weapon, your reach has increased.
Yeah.
And so you can now make an unarmed strike from a reached thing.
I'd say that might lean into like monk weapons, like when you're using staves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that might be where it leans into. I mean,
I think they might. I think maybe when they come out with that, that's either an oversight on their part or they're rewording what it means to have a reach weapon. Like your reach does not increase by 5 feet, but you can extend an attack roll like 5 feet further than your reach or something.
Grapple. The target is grappled, and the grapple DC is 8 plus your strength modifier plus your proficiency. This grapple is only possible if the target is no more than one size category larger than you, and if you have a hand free to grab the target. So you can basically grab someone. So basically, a person can grab a giant with one arm if he can make the check. Shove. You can either push the target 5 foot away or knock the target prone. This shove is possible only if the target is no more than one size category larger than you. So technically, in that previous one, you can trip them already and make that attack with that second attack with I think it was the Tavern Brawler one. The one that.
So I think Tavern Brawler doesn't have a size category.
Tavern Brawler didn't have a size category and just said 5 feet away.
Yeah, and they're prone.
But it said specifically when you take the shove action though.
You can take the shove action and push the target.
In the Tavern Brawler, it said when you make an unarmed attack and hit, you can deal the damage as normal and push them 5 feet away.
Oh, right. Okay.
Is it? Yeah, okay.
All right.
So you could deal the damage as normal. So I would argue that you can, and I don't know if this is rules written, but you can use the Tavern Brawler to make an attack instead of dealing the damage you are doing the shove effect of that.
Yeah. Well, I think the oversight here is that they've named both of those things shove.
Yeah.
I think that would be the oversight. Is I would rename one of them. Like one of them could be knockback. Like the other one could be knockback, and
yeah.
this could be shove. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Cool. And they've got a size restriction on that one. Then
Interesting shenanigans can come from it for sure. You can you can attack with a huge attack modifier. You no longer have to be good at athletics to be good at grappling, which I don't like. I was actually leaning the other way with my homebrew. I was starting to consider applying another skill into the game called wrestle, that you can take proficiency in, and if you are proficient in wrestling, you're better at making or escaping grapples.
Yeah. I think athletics is the way to go about things like grappling and stuff like that. Like
I think athletics does a lot of heavy lifting. I think it's used for too many things, and it becomes one of those must-have skills.
Was that a pun?
And it's the only it wasn't it's the only strength-based skill as written, which makes it very easy to conflate between strength and athletics. Anytime that you ask for a strength check, if the person's proficient in athletics, they'll go, is it an athletics check? Because they want to have that proficiency bonus.
That's true.
And most of the time you'll say yes, because you don't have any idea as a dungeon master what's the difference in strength and athletics.
Yeah.
You barely have the difference between athletics and acrobatics, because those two get conflated too often. I think if you separated out this confused nature of like when you're trying to escape a grapple, you can choose athletics or acrobatics. Instead, you're just making your wrestle check, because you're either good at wrestling and jujitsu and escaping grapples, or you're not.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
Cool.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, that brings us to the end. Well, there's a big spell list, but there's just these are the spells
same
available.
spells.
Yeah,
it's the same spells, but they've just given examples of which of the 3 different lists they'll be on there.
Yep.
Exactly. And they've just essentially like there's no ranger list or druid list.
The one thing I will say that I noticed from this though is that under arcane spell list and primal spell list, under cantrips they've got mending on both. So mending is arcane and mending is primal, but it's not under divine. And I'm thinking, is it going to be like an exception to the rule that sometimes there are spells on this list? Because if you were a cleric to a forge god, or a god of creation, or a god of some sort of invention, you would have mending.
If I had to guess, I would say
did they put that in the class's spell list though?
Maybe it's like
way.
Exceptions to the rule. Like if you choose first level forge domain, you also get access to mending.
Yeah, I think that's likely how they'll go about stuff like that.
Because I like that this is a lot cleaner than having like 8 different spell lists. We now have like 3
and then when
different...
they introduced Artificer, they were like, choose from the wizard spell list for now. And then when they officially released the Artificer, they were like, now we've got an Artificer spell list, which is just puzzled together from everybody else.
This is a good change. I like this change a lot.
It's a great change.
Nice and simplified.
I liked it the first time I saw it. But no, it's really good. It makes it, I think, a lot more streamlined to use spellcasting. I'm actually really interested in how they're going to handle spellcasting as well in a lot of other details. But for now, however, character building, classes, feats, all that sort of stuff, everything. See, I'm really excited about what's here and what's there. Obviously, I've got some trepidations around inspiration. I think the race stuff could use that like +1 boost that I think that we were mentioning before. But all in all, I think it is it feels like 5.5. It smells like 5.5. But hey, if they're going to hold true to it and One D&D is going to be the way of the future, then I'll be I'm keen to see where they'll go. How do you guys feel?
Same. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. There's some things that I despise about the crits and things, but there's most of it. I'm either meh or I'm like that's a great direction to go. So,
yeah, we need to remember that like this is just playtest material, and that they need to try things to see how it works and see how the community responds to it. And it's just like us taking license in our games and changing things that we want to change. We need to give them the chance to change the things that they want to change and look at, and we can always like alter it, right? At the end of the day, like I don't think I'm gonna stop playing D&D. I'll just be playing my D&D, and that's generally what I do anyway. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's it. It's always going to be your version of D&D, no matter what it is. And I mean, there are tons of games out there. As people know, like I play millions of different games as well, and I won't stop playing D&D because it's gone this way. Just like I haven't stopped playing 3.5. It's like just it's the way it is. All right. Well, thank you for coming and hanging out today, gents. This has been a long single recording video, but we will be breaking this up into more digestible sections. But guys, tell us who you are. Tell us where we can find you. Going from you, Handsome Dread.
Oh, hi, I'm Josh, Dread from DeadAussieGamer. You can find me on the YouTube channel DeadAussieGamer or the Twitch channel DeadAussieGamer or on Twitter on just DeadAussieGamer. Just search DeadAussieGamer. I am a ball of wholesome love. I try to bring as much positivity and celebration to the space as I can. As you heard at the front of this big segment or this big recording, I do a lot of charity streams. I think that gaming is a very powerful thing that we have the absolute honor of using, and I love to use it towards helping people, whether that is building creative confidence or helping people out in the world. So I always try to do that sort of thing. So if you want to see more of what I do, go head to those places, and you'll find my face doing all the things. So hell's yeah.
And of course, the ever delightful Robert Hartley.
Hello, I'm Robert Hartley GM. I am a full-time professional dungeon master. I do this for a living. I am a dungeon master for a comedy group called Viva la Dirt League. We've got a YouTube channel where we've got over 100 episodes of a campaign and approaching 300,000 subscribers at this point. I'm also a dungeon master in my own right on Twitch and YouTube and all of the different places, Instagram and Twitter and all that. You can find me anywhere at Robert Hartley GM.
Fantastic. And my name's Michael. I'm the DeadAussieGamer. You can find me here because this is my channel. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/DeadAussieGamer, where I hang out and play with these two amazing content creators from Australia and New Zealand, as well as a whole bunch of other amazing and talented friends from our RPG community. So go be sure to follow myself, Rob, and Dread, and come and follow in all of our shenanigans. And be sure to check out the links in the description below, because we're also going to be including links to the playtest as well as where you guys can give your feedback, because feedback for this is going to be super important. You know, hell, Wizards of the Coasts, the community, we're all counting on each other. So be sure to play around, have a bit of fun, and yeah. As always, whatever the game it is, whatever you're doing for yourself, have fun, enjoy yourself. Until we meet again, as always, game hard.
Or die trying.
Bye, folks.
Bye.